Welcome to the Queens of Moxie. I'm Mary Kay Campbell, the host of this program, and I'm so excited that you've decided to join us today. Every week, we bring amazing women to our podcast to talk about how they have stepped into joy and reclaimed their moxie and are living their authentic life. I want to get started, but before we do, I want to remind you to subscribe to the weekly email. Simply go to queensofmoxie.com and click on Weekly Inspiration. That way, every Monday morning, you'll get a link to the latest podcast, a beautiful image, and a fabulous quote. It's a great way to start out your week. So let's get started with today's podcast. Welcome to the Queens of Moxie. I am so excited today. We have Beth Thomsen, and she is such a dynamo, y'all. And I met her through a friend recently, and I just feel like I have connected with my soul sister here. She's just amazing. And I can't wait to get into it and have you all learn more about her. First, I want to give you a little background. She went to VCU, which is Virginia Commonwealth University, for those of you who don't know what VCU stands for, and she got her degree in mass communication. She spent most of her career in the marketing and communications space. And about a year ago, really embrace something that's been a part of her life her entire life, but is something that people may or may not necessarily know about, and you get different reception on it. And so we're going to get into that in a little bit. But before I tell you more about that, she has two daughters, a 5-year-old and a 20-month-old. So for those of you moms out there, you know what those years were like. And her husband, Sherry, sells medical device equipment. And they recently relocated to a suburb of Atlanta, and they're settling in there. And y'all, I am just so excited to talk to Mary Beth. And, how can I not love someone with a double Mary name? I mean, seriously. So welcome, Mary Beth.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So, I love the fact that you've got, like I said, you're my soul sister. You've got your degree in writing. That's what my degrees are in. Like we've shared very similar trajectories as far as our career goes from the strategic communication perspective. But there is something that has been a part of who you are your whole life. And it's something that I think you probably didn't share with a lot of people initially and had some trepidation about sharing it. So I want to jump right into it, and I want you to tell us what that is.
So sure. What you're referring to is my ability to communicate with spirit. And I first learned that I had this ability in my early 20s. I'm now in my 40s, so it's been a couple of decades now. The first time was my grandfather, my mother's father, came through while I was on a treadmill at the gym. And if you're not familiar with this space, there's something people refer to as the clairs, and clair is a French term for clear. So clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient. So in that instance with my grandfather, I just felt his presence. So I would say that would probably be like clairsentience, where I just felt his presence. And it kind of came out of nowhere. I didn't physically see him, his spirit, but I felt his presence. He passed away when I was very, very young, maybe 8 years old or so. So I didn't have a very close relationship with him. But in any event, I felt his presence. He started talking to me, and this was all telepathically, in my mind. And looking back, it feels so surreal, even as I share this a couple decades later. And that was the beginning of hearing from spirit as being a conduit, if you will, and receiving messages from my own loved ones. And then subsequently my closest friends and family's loved ones. And this was a very big secret for many, many years. I kept it private. I grew up in the Catholic Church. So there was this fear of judgment, probably some fear of people thinking you're cuckoo crazy, because how do you even explain this? So fast forward to today, I'm so comfortable sharing it because it's as natural to me as breathing.
Wow.
So for me to not have ownership of that is very unnatural. So I feel very confident, very comfortable sharing it. I see it as a blessing. I see it as a gift. And not a gift in the sense that some people have it and some people don't, because I do think we all are equipped to have connection to spirit. I think some people do have a little bit of a higher inclination to receive and understand messages, but we all have the bandwidth and the ability to. And so, as you mentioned a year ago, I started a new business outside of marketing in life coaching and intuitive life coaching specifically. So I use my intuitive abilities in my coaching modality and also use other tools and resources that would be probably considered them in the metaphysical realm, which would be color energy and things like that, meditation exercises, and kind of giving people grounding techniques and tools. And so in addition to life coaching, I also offer mediumship and intuitive life path sessions. So those are two kind of separate services that I offer. And I've never felt more in my purpose or in my power in my entire life.
You've said so many things in there, so I want to unpack it a little bit.
Yeah.
So going back to when this first happened, I mean, what was your reaction when you're having this dialogue with your grandfather who passed, 12, 10, whatever, however many years before, and you're on a treadmill in the gym. Like, walk us through what that was like.
Yeah. So I didn't give you context. So my grandfather was talking about my sister. I have one sister and four brothers. My only sister, he was referring to, it sounds scary to say this, but she ended up being fine, but it was about her needing to get her mammogram. And so it was a message of concern, but it wasn't alarming. It was more so she needs to be diligent to follow up on this particular test. And I don't know if it was Breast Cancer Awareness Month, but there was something timely too that was kind of top of mind as well. I will say, as a side note, our own intuition from our higher self or messages from spirit tend to get through to us when we are in a meditative state. So being on a treadmill is such a perfect example of that I just want to point out. Doing dishes, going on a walk, folding your laundry, doing your makeup, anything of that nature where you're, or in the shower, that's another good one, is because your quote unquote monkey mind is a little bit slower. So they're able to kind of get in there and can kind of get your attention.
Yes.
So I ended up going, of course, calling my sister and said, I have something unusual to tell you. My sister was very sweet, very receptive, didn't think it was weird at all. And she admitted that she was behind schedule on getting her mammogram. She ended up going, finding out that there was a concern. I think she had found out that she had maybe denser breast tissue, had to do additional screening. And to this day, she still needs to get secondary screenings and tests done. But it was a very, again, surreal experience, but comforting. It was comforting to know, wow, my grandfather's, around and he's looking out for us. So that was what the experience was like initially.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about faith. And there may be some people listening who people are like, peace out, this is not for me, and that's okay.
Absolutely.
I understand that. I know that throughout my life there have been very, very clear messages, and that the messages have been through other people in a totally unexpected way, through the presentation of something, in this world that answers a question that I've put out there. But I the one that strikes me so strongly is, so I am a very faithful Christian. And so I think that, for some people you go, how does this coincide with Christianity? For me, it's my guardian angels. It truly is God's love. And that for me, that's what it is. And when my children were young, I had gotten divorced when they were 2 and 5. And when my daughter was in 2nd grade, so I guess 8, and my son was 11, my ex-husband sued me over custody. And I wasn't willing to put my children on the stand, and I wasn't allowed to say all the things that the children had told me that had happened because it was considered hearsay. And as a result, I had huge debt from my attorney just to fight this. And nothing changed except my ex owed me back child support. But I felt like I had failed my kids. And I was sobbing and waking up in the middle of the night, just so defeated and felt horribly. And I'll never forget this one night I woke up at 3 a.m. and I was sobbing, and I got in the shower and I was like, God, how could this happen? I was the only one that could protect them and I failed. And very clearly I heard, no, I am the only one that can protect them.
Wow.
Very clearly.
Uh-huh.
And it was like, oh, okay, there's something higher going on here. I don't know why I couldn't say the things I needed to say. I don't know why things played out the way they did, but God is protecting my kids. And it gave me unbelievable comfort. And I thought, okay, there is a higher power for good that is working on my behalf. And my guardian angels are all around me. So tell me how you went from being in a strict Catholic home to embracing this aspect of yourself.
That's a great question. So I basically, in retrospect, looking back at my experience, think there's actually a lot of foundational attributes that are very similar, ironically, in the Catholic Church as with the abilities of a medium. In the Catholic Church, they teach you to rely and call on your angels, which is a higher being entity that you cannot see. They teach you to pray to saints, to ask for their intercession and their protection and their support. Some of those saints were once human beings who are now, in their soul body form. Of course, we're taught to talk to God himself or Jesus Christ or his mother Mary. And so there's this very specific communication style with these beings and these entities and light forms that you cannot see or have an actual dialogue with face to face. This is all telepathically. This is all happening energetically. And that's exactly what I'm experiencing when I'm talking to departed loved ones on behalf of my clients or my friends or family. And so I find there's actually so much similarity, which is so ironic since there is a little bit of a judgment when it comes to people having these quote unquote mediumship abilities. And I have a lot of grace and empathy for people who are fearful of it or scared of it, because I think generally speaking, as humans, what we don't understand can be quite scary. And I totally appreciate that. And it is hard for our human brains to wrap our heads around, truly.
Sure. Yeah.
And so all I know is what I've experienced and later validated through other people who've written books about it and people who have podcasts and things like that, that has only confirmed that it's not just me, that there are other people, many other people out there who have this ability. And like I told you earlier, because this is a part of who I am, I feel very strongly of who am I to deny that, To be fair, I'm a big believer in self-love and self-acceptance and believing that the universe is conspiring for our greatest and highest good. And so I just naturally over time came to terms with seeing it as something that didn't need to be a secret. And in fact, why I added it to my life coaching business originally, when I was about to launch my business in November of last year, I didn't intend on having this as a service, but it occurred to me that by keeping it to myself or to my immediate circle, that I'm not being of service. And so I consider myself a light worker, which is basically a conduit for spreading light and and trying to be a positive light force. And so I thought, okay, well, if this is a God-given ability that I was given, or that I'm able to really tap into, maybe I can touch more people that way. And so when I look at it that way, that I'm using this ability to be of service and help others,
Right.
whether it's comfort or healing or clarity or whatever it might be, it's such a blessing, and I'm honored to be a part of that.
Yeah. So you had this first experience, and did they start coming more quickly at that point? Or, was it one of those things where, you opened the floodgates and it just poured in, or was it gradual?
It was gradual. I would say when I was younger, it was gradual. And I found a connection between when I personally in my life felt grounded. I felt maybe I was tapped into my spirituality and my faith, and I felt very centered, was when I always use this metaphor of a radio antenna. So I have this antenna, it's always there, but
Mhm.
whether or not it's pulled all the way up so I get a very high frequency and hear very clearly, that is when I would receive messages
Yeah.
very, very effortlessly. And then in times of my life where I was, maybe going through stressful experiences or going through, some challenging events, then it wasn't quite as frequent. And then as I got older, probably into my 30s, I think just with life experience, you also grow up and you start to care less about what other people think of you and things
Mhm.
like that. It just continued to grow and become more frequent. And now into my 40s, I don't think I could turn it off if I wanted to. And I would never want to turn it off, but
Right.
it's such a part of my life. From the moment I wake up to the moment I go to sleep, I feel completely and utterly connected to
Wow.
life force and spirit, that it's humbling, but it's also so beautiful. I feel like I wear the lenses that I look through. I wish I could have everyone be able to experience what it's like, how thin the veil between spirit and us as humans.
Yeah.
It's not this, other worlds or universe away. They're the spirit energy of our loved ones and our angels. I mean, they're literally right next to us. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for me, that's very comforting. My mom passed in February, and so it's not even been a year yet. And my mom and I didn't have the best relationship. In fact, we had a very difficult relationship. And about a month before she died, we were able to repair that. And I think it's because I was working with an intuitive life coach, and she helped me to clear some things out that were creating blockages between my mom and I, and being able to relate with each other. And when my mom passed, I vividly remember my brother, my dad, and I were standing around the bed where my mom was. My sister had moved to the West Coast and couldn't get back in time. So it was the three of us with my mom, and we were all crying very, very hard.
Mm.
And I said, can we lay our hands on mom and pray with her for her? And so we did, and I started praying, and I intuitively knew that I needed to create space for my mom to transition. And as soon as I said the words, and I don't remember the exact words, but it was basically about, mom, you're at peace. We love you. It's time. You can transition into the next world. Go in peace. Know that you don't have any more pain. All the things that you want someone to feel when they're making that transition. And as soon as I said those words, my mother, my dad, and I all stopped crying at the exact same moment. We all stopped crying. And my dad was watching my mom's face, and it went from a look of pain and anguish to relaxed. Now, like I said, I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew intuitively that I needed to create space for her to make that transition. And I know my mom is one of my guardian angels. I know that. And there have been times, I am not kidding, when I was struggling with something, and I was calling on my guardian angels, I need some guidance on this. And my mom was there, and it was not a topic I wanted to discuss with my mom. And I was like, no, Mom, no. It was about parenting, actually. And I was like, you don't get to do that. And I happened to go to physical therapy with my physical therapist does cranial sacral work. And it was crazy, because I say crazy, that's not the right adjective. It was remarkable. She laid her hands on me, and she's like, who are you seeing? And I was like, my mom. And immediately burst into tears and started talking about how our relationship was, and how that related to my relationship with my children. And it was very freeing, because I don't have the same relationship with my children, even though my children and I are struggling because they're individuating, and they're 17 and 20, and they know everything and I know nothing. It reaffirmed to me that I'm a good mom, that I did a good job, and the challenges that my mom and I faced, I haven't done those kinds of things. I have a different kind of relationship with my kids. And I'll tell you what, Mary Beth, I did not want to talk to my mom. I literally had said to her, no. Then she was there, and I was like, are you kidding me? And I was like, seriously. So, I think if we're all honest with ourselves, there have been moments in our lives when we have felt like someone we loved that has passed is there. It could be a butterfly that lands on a plant next to you. It could be a feeling of comfort that you gain when you're struggling. It could be someone who says the right thing to you at the right time. It could be a rainbow. It could be any number of things. And if we open our eyes and are willing to accept that there is this spirit life around us, I think we find so much joy and comfort and peace. And for me, I feel it does ground me. It does make me feel good about my loved ones that have passed, but also the life here. What have you heard from your clients, from your friends, from whomever that you've done this work with about that aspect?
Well, first of all, I want to say I'm sorry about your mother's passing. Thank you for sharing that. And I just want to mention briefly that in my experience and my understanding, when we are in true spirit form and no longer in our human body form, we are stripped of our egos. And so what I have found in my experience is that when spirits or loved ones come through, they have much more clarity about maybe some of their decisions that they made, or something that they did or behaved, and might show some remorse or just acknowledging that. And so I just want people to know that if they did have a difficult or challenging relationship with a loved one while they were here and have since crossed, that it's your journey of forgiveness or acceptance or healing or maybe doing nothing about it. But the point is, I just want people to know that your loved ones who have crossed over have a much clearer perspective about things and have the reflection to know and taking accountability for some of their choices and behaviors, and learning and having that perspective. And gosh, we are just our greatest teachers, right? The family that we chose at a soul level to help us evolve and grow, and for better or for worse. And as far as signs, when I do sessions for my clients, I usually will ask for a sign or a symbol, and they're always very clear about that. I've also had some very funny sense of humor spirits. I'll tell you a quick story it's going to sound absolutely ridiculous, but it is so ridiculous that it's worth sharing, because oftentimes you will hear about ladybugs and butterflies and dragonflies and things of that nature. But one time when and that's usually what I get, things of that nature, and no pun intended, because a lot of times it's in nature. but this one particular client, I heard it was her father who passed away, and he said pigeon, and I thought, you've got to be kidding me. pigeon. That's not a very, warm and fuzzy kind of, creature that you would think of when it came to spirit messages. And I kind of chuckled and said, okay, seriously. And I kept hearing pigeon, pigeon. And I was like, okay, if that's what you say. And so I shared it with the person I was doing the session for, and she started laughing hysterically. And I said, okay, does this resonate with you? She said, is that why I've gotten pooped on by a pigeon 3 times in 6 months? And she doesn't even live in an area that's known for pigeons. And I felt better that this message made sense, but I felt terrible that she was getting pooped on.
Right.
And I said, okay, first of all, your dad evidently had a funny sense of humor. She goes, oh yeah, he was a prankster. And I said, okay, so he's communicating in that way that you would know. And I said, now that we've confirmed, what, he's showing you his sign or whatever, you can set boundaries and say to him, okay, Dad, I got it. I know this is you being funny and getting my attention, but enough is enough. And she goes, no, I don't mind. I said, okay, that's your choice. If you think, you want to play along with your dad, then that's funny. So I just thought I just wanted to, illustrate that spirit can still have a very funny sense of humor. But for sure that when, more than anything, when your loved one comes to your mind and is in your thoughts, that is an indication that they're with you. So if you do see something that reminds you of them, you hear a song on the radio, you have, a butterfly that goes directly across your path and maybe stops right next to you on a bush and just doesn't move for a few minutes. And you just thought, this is powerful. I don't know what's going on. Things that you can't explain, that is 100%, in my opinion, your spirit, your loved one getting your attention. And then it's our job not to question it.
Yeah. Yeah.
We make their jobs very difficult when it's like, okay, can you give me a signier sign, because that wasn't enough. Yeah. So yes, they are very skilled at communicating with us, and I find very, very clever.
It's interesting. So my son is 20 and he's majoring in biotechnology and systems, and you could not get a more left-brained person at all. And so even when he was in middle school, I will never forget, we were eating outside and we were talking about faith and God. And he said, well, how do you know that God is real? And I said, well, Evan, it's faith. And I said, how do you don't know that I love you except that I tell you that I love you? And he said, no, there is a neurological and physiological response to love. When you do an MRI, you can see the certain parts of the brain light up, blah, 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 blah. And, he's like 11, right? And my daughter goes, stop, you're ruining love for me. And I sat there and I thought, yeah, these are my 2 kids, and, this conversation would not be possible with my son. It just would not be, because if it can't be proven through scientific method, it's my perception of things. It's how I'm looking at things, the lens through which I'm looking at things, the way in which I explain things to myself so that I can live with the way things are. I mean, these are honest to God conversations I've had with my son and things that he said to me. So, we're going to put those people aside, because everybody has their own journey and each of us has a different one. And so, there is this level of trust and faith and acceptance. And what do you do when, do people come to you and question that, or by the time they come to you, they're already in that boat where, like, okay, I get this, I know this is important, and I know you can help me get to where I'm going?
So I have 2 parts to that question. The first is that, ironically, and I think people would be surprised to hear this, I'm highly analytical. And I am very strategic, as you mentioned. Our background in communications is strategy is my PowerPoint of one of my strengths. And when I used to work for a marketing agency, I was a project manager. So Excel spreadsheets, which aren't my favorite by any means, but my point is that I have the part of my brain where I have to be hyper focused. And my first job actually was in news reporting. And I'm the kind of person, I don't believe gossip. I don't believe hype. I don't believe hearsay. And as that kind of reporter in me, I want to know your source. I want to know the facts. I want to fact check. And that's just kind of who I am. So that's that part of my brain. And then there's the other part of my brain, which is hyper creative. And I'm a writer and I'm a communicator and I'm an intuitive and I'm an empath. So I'm this walking kind of anomaly, which is a little bit unusual. So I definitely appreciate the people who want to know the facts and the source and want to prove things. I certainly appreciate that. As you know, faith, cannot be proved. That's kind of the definition of faith, is just knowing and believing and trusting. But to your other question, I don't have people come to me who are of that mindset or nature, because that's, I think that's not my audience. I think that's not my client. It's the people who do have faith and believe and trust and want to hear, messages from their higher self or higher power, and have that belief. And I always tell people, take what resonates with you. As far as the psychic intuitive part, there's the mediumship part, then there's also the psychic intuitive part of what I do. I say a prayer actually to Saint Archangel Michael for protection energetically, and then also ask for, spirit guides and angels to be a conduit in this whole messaging process. But in any event, I basically like to ask for messages for your best and highest good. And that's the bottom line. That's the takeaway, is that we're getting information for your best and highest good. And so I tell people, I don't like to do predictions, because we have free will. So I can give you my intuitive hit of what I think might be of a positive experience for you or for your best and highest good. But you have the decision and the free will to make your own choices. So it's more so insights and information that will help you better understand yourself, understand the lesson and the journey that you're going through and why you're going through it, and some tools and resources to help you have the clarity and the discernment to go through whatever life experiences you're going through. Because most of the time, people who do book sessions are having some type of hardship of some nature, whether it's their family or their marriage or their job or something, relationships, things like that. So
So how do you protect yourself and others? I mean, there's good and evil. I mean, there just is.
Yep.
So how do you protect yourself and your clients from negative energy?
I'm so glad you asked that question, because it is very important to me, and it's important really for everyone. If people who are listening are not familiar with the term empath, it's an identifier for someone who's empathic, which means that you're sensitive to energy. So you might walk into a room and that someone just finished having an argument, or someone's in a bad mood. Or you're sitting on an airplane next to someone and you just feel bad energy. That is the ability to kind of perceive the energy around you. You might not like being in crowded areas and spaces because of that very reason. You kind of are a sponge for energy if you don't know how to protect yourself. And so as an empath, I've had to do a lot of work in research and learning and education to be able to be a healthy, functioning person who's not walking around holding everyone's energy. So I'm really glad you asked that question. One of the things that people can do to protect themselves is basically before you leave your house in the morning, you can close your eyes and envision what I would call like a white light or white bubble around you. And that, white is the color of protection and spirituality. And so you're basically energetically wrapping your body and your space and your aura in love and light. And it's your way to protect yourself energetically, so that people are not going to latch onto your energy or kind of interfere with that. And you can also claim it, with your own voice and say, today I am walking in love and light and in God's highest protection. And I might even do that with my husband. If I know he's driving home from a long commute and it's raining outside, I will envision wrapping his car in a vision of white light. So I'll do that on an airplane, things like that. So that's one simple technique that you can do to help protect your energy. another measure to protect yourself that's very important, especially if you're, a sensitive kind of person, is to ground your energy at the end of the day. So if you're familiar with chakras, it's basically our life force energy. If you imagine the bottom of your spine is your root chakra. And so either at the base of your spine or at the bottom of your feet, you can envision a beam or a cord of light going deep into the earth. And that is a way to kind of bring your energy back down to be centered, especially if you've had a very frantic day and had, you're feeling, a little bit out of control, or you're feeling a little bit flustered. Doing this is very helpful to kind of grounding your energy and kind of settling back down. And then also you may or may not have heard of a thing called energetic cord cutting. And so have you ever been in a place where you, for no discernible reason, are in a bad mood, or you just feel like your own energy has shifted? Well, what happens a lot of times, we don't realize it, is someone has attached their energy to you. They may not very well have even done it consciously, but it's called courting somebody. So what I have become very aware of this happening. And when I do what I'm about to explain to you, it very much helps release their energy from me and kind of get back into my own energy space. And so what you would do is, if you want to imagine, again, whether you want to have a cord or a rope or something of that nature, but in your mind's eye, in your imagination, you're going to imagine taking out this cord, and you can either, use a pair of scissors, you can pull it out and kind of watch it go back to that person. And you can say something like, at this time, I'm releasing all energetic cords that have been tied to me today or retroactively, and I send the energy back to the source with light, love, and compassion. And so that is a way to release any energy, and that is, in my opinion, would be another protection type of thing for yourself, because you do not want to be holding other people's energy. And when I hold sessions for people, and I do intuitive sessions, and I connect with them, their higher self, their loved ones in spirit, I do this process every single session at the end, to release and to go back to my own energy field.
And
it works.
It does. It does.
Yeah.
I've done that work with the coach that I worked with before, with some things that had happened in the past and some individuals that I needed to. And some of those cords, I tell you what, they were really thick, and I needed to saw them. I'm not kidding. And then create that bubble of light around myself to protect myself from that coming back. But when my mom passed, I was talking with Terry, and it was 2 days later, and I'm like, I am so exhausted, and I just feel, and she's like, oh, we didn't ground you. We didn't clear that out.
Yes.
Again, I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew that I needed to do it. And so once we cleared that out, I felt like myself again, and I felt better. And so, I'm sure there are people listening right now that are like, this is really woo-woo, and, and I think, while your clients that come to you understand this, and as I truly believe that as more people are exposed to it and they learn more about it and they understand it more, they can get their arms around it and go, okay, yes, this makes sense to me. But there are always going to be some of those naysayers out there. And, I would imagine when you really went public with this, that was a fear of yours, is that people, what are people going to say? What are people going to think about me? How did you combat that?
So I actually didn't feel that by the time I was ready to, come out of this closet, so to speak. At that time, I no longer had any fear. It was the 2 decades prior to that I was concerned that people might judge me or, have an opinion about me. But again, like I was telling you earlier, I think that through just life experience and growing up, and having some more wisdom, I started to realize that I love myself, and I love myself for who I am. And I don't, you hear that expression, other people's opinions of you are none of my business. And I just don't have judgment for other people's opinions. So if someone judges me for this, God bless them. If they disagree with me, great. I don't hold any ownership or responsibility of other people's opinions or perceptions, or and that's what makes us who we are. That's why we're different. So I'm not here to try to convince anyone of anything. I completely respect everyone's own personal beliefs, and beautiful. It's just beautiful to be who we are and to own that. So I did not have any concern about that by the time I was ready to go public.
Yeah.
Yeah.
20 years earlier, it would have been a different story, but by the time you did this,
yeah.
super. So I have just a couple more questions, and then I'll let you go. But you talked about different modalities. So there's, seeing images, hearing people, hearing voice, hearing someone speak with you, sensing that someone is there. That's all the clairs. There's the meditative state that when you are, doing something that is routine enough that you're not thinking about it, that you have lowered, I don't want to say your guard, but you've lowered the walls, so to speak, so that you can receive those things. There are different aspects of what you do, and can you give us like a real brief high level overview of the different components of your work?
Sure. So, like I mentioned earlier, there's this idea of being a psychic and intuitive and connecting with someone energetically. And then there's also the mediumship side. This is a common expression that is not a fact, but it's just a common understood belief that a lot of people have in this industry, is that all mediums are psychics, but not all psychics are mediums. And that's just because simply you will not find a medium who is not psychic, but there are psychics who don't have the ability to communicate with spirit. So they might be able to pick up your energy and see into your life and get insights about what's going on in your life or what's important to you or whatever, but maybe not talking to past deceased, departed loved ones.
And what so is the person that can, because I want to make sure people understand the medium aspect of that is that communication, that two-way.
Correct. So
spirit world.
Exactly. Yep. So I'm a conduit. I'm a medium from spirit who's crossed over, and then my clients. And so the psychic work it just takes basically me raising my energy, my vibration, and connecting with someone at a soul level. And I ask for permission. When I do that, by people setting the appointment with me, they're giving me permission to connect with them energetically. So that's kind of a given. But I would never interfere with someone's energy at a party or in business spaces, because that's not ethical. And so I only would do it with someone's permission. And then with the mediumship, I think it just takes a higher vibration. So I really have to raise my vibration, and then spirit has to lower their vibration to kind of meet me in the middle. And I basically hear from them, again, clairaudiently. So I have thoughts in my head of them talking to me, but they're not my thoughts. So that's what that means. I'm not actually hearing someone, outside talking to me. And I also see, if I were to give you an example, if I say, close your eyes and imagine that you're on a beach and you can see the ocean waves and, you can feel the wind on your face, you can do that with your imagination. So that's what I'm seeing in that part of my mind. But it's not my vision. They're showing me these images or kind of scenes. Clairsentient, like I said earlier, is that feeling, sometimes actually this has only happened a couple of times, and I'm very grateful for it because I don't particularly care for feeling people's physical ailments. But there were a couple of clients whose spirits had COPD, and I was coughing and I couldn't control it, and I wasn't sick. And by the time I disconnected from them energetically, I stopped coughing. So there have been times where I have taken on some of their symptoms, but that would be a clairsentient. And then cognizant is clear knowing, and that's just when you just know. It's all the different clairs combined into one. So those are the different abilities, and every intuitive or medium has stronger abilities than others that they work with the most. And then psychically, again, it's just your higher self giving me information for in my intention is for your best and highest good.
Right.
And I always tell people, when it comes to your intuition versus a fear, your intuition, usually comes out of nowhere. So you're not thinking about it. It's not something you're fixated on. It comes to you quite literally out of nowhere, and it doesn't come through scary.
Yeah.
It's kind of just a statement. It's just a knowing, and just a piece of information.
All right. So one final question, and I ask all my guests this because I think I am always amazed at what people share and how it's related but very different. And so if you were to give our listeners, the people who are tuning in today, one piece of advice, what would you give them?
That's hard, because there is so much advice that I think is valuable when it comes to our spirit and our higher selves. But I think more than anything, what can serve us the most is our intuition, because our intuition is coming from our spirit guides, our angels, our higher self, our loved ones in spirit, and they all want the best for us. And the intuition comes from a place of protection and wanting the best for us. And so when we don't tune into the intuition, we're making things harder on ourselves. And so I think that's probably the best piece of advice I could give someone, is to try to learn to differentiate what is your intuition and what is just a fear. And the more you trust your intuition and you go with it, the better you're going to become at discerning your intuition, and the more it's going to serve you every day of your life. And so on my website, I have lots of tools and resources that have to do with this topic. It's a passion of mine. So they can go and read articles and blog posts. And on Instagram, I have lots of posts at Soul Shines Coaching that I would be happy to, just free resources for people to help learn and kind of heighten their intuition to help serve their lives and living the best life that they can.
That's great. That's fantastic. Well, and we'll put the link to your website in the show notes, and your headshot and everything, so everybody can learn more about you. But Mary Beth, I feel like I'm so lucky, because I get to just sit here and pick your brain about this, and it's something that I've been fascinated with for I don't know, 30 years when I first heard about it. And I'm so grateful that you have taken time, and that you are so open and generous with your knowledge. And I really believe that the women listening today are going to really take something away from this, and understand it a little more, understand themselves a little more, and understand the importance of listening to their intuition, and that it's there for a reason, and it's strong for a reason, and tuning into it is incredibly valuable. So
absolutely. No, I'm honored to have met you, and our paths crossed. And I don't believe in accidents or coincidences. This was kind of divine intervention for us to meet each other and to have this conversation. And I do hope that people who listen take away a feeling of empowerment, of kind of accepting themselves for who they are, owning who they are, having, knowing that they have power, and telling their truth, and owning who they are.
Yeah, it's great. Well, thank you again.
Thanks for joining us on the Queens of Moxie podcast. I hope that you found it inspirational, and that it helps you to think about how you can step into joy and live your authentic life. And remember, we have a weekly email so that you don't miss any of these episodes. Plus, it starts your Monday out with an inspirational quote and a beautiful image. If you haven't subscribed yet, go to queensofmoxie.com and click on Weekly Inspiration. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you again next week.